is Mete Yurtsever. I'm the host of the Formula for Creating Value podcast. And today my special guest is Melina Palmer, CEO of the Brainy Business and the host of the Brainy Business Podcast. Welcome, Melina.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's a great privilege to have you. I'm a big fan, and your podcast is a true inspiration for me, both in terms of content and the format, how you organize your show notes and everything, and all these links and everything. So, and I'm now honored to be a member of your book launch team.
Yes, thank you.
So let me introduce you to our audience briefly. At the Brainy Business, you provide behavioral economics training and consulting to businesses of all sizes from all around the world. You have a podcast, The Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. It has downloads over 170 countries, as far as I know. And I read that it is used as a source for teaching applied behavioral economics for many universities and businesses. And you're teaching applied behavioral economics through the Texas A&M Human Behavior Lab, right?
Yeah.
And you obtained your master's in behavioral economics from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology.
Yes.
And you're a member of the Global Association of Applied Behavioral Scientists. So far, you had 2 books, right? What your customer wants and can tell you. And now what your employees need and can't tell you will be released on, actually tomorrow, when we were going to air this, on 11th
Yay.
of October. So I must say I couldn't have prepared enough for this interview, even if I had 2 more weeks or 2 more months. So because I have... I'm full of questions. So, but to start with, I wonder when and how you discovered about behavioral science. What exactly attracted you into behavioral science?
Sure. So for me, my undergrad is in business administration with a focus in marketing. And when I was doing that program, at the time, I wasn't even thinking about going for further education. My sister and I are the first generation of my family to go to college. And I just wasn't even a blip on my radar, but I was reading. There was one section of one book in one class, just this teeny tiny little bit that was about buying psychology and why people did the things they do, why they buy the things they buy. And I thought it was just the most amazing thing that I had ever seen. And I was so interested. I said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get a master's in this. Like, this is so cool. I was so excited. And I spent the better part of 10 years calling schools that all said, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist. That's not a program. You can come, you can create your own program if you want, to which you kind of say, well, like, if I knew what I needed to learn, I don't need to pay you a bunch of money to do that. And so went into industry and was working and running a marketing department, doing brand strategy and being part of various programs, got into some innovation stuff. And in this 2-year innovation fellowship is kind of the best way to explain it. A program I was in, they brought in some people from the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University, which is Dan Ariely's team.
Wow.
There, their behavioral economics department, and the research they were talking about they were doing and everything they were working on. I realized, oh my gosh, this is the thing I've been spending a decade searching for. And so, I made them talk to me, I'm sure, for much longer than they wanted to, and found out, it's called behavioral economics, and found myself what was, at the time, the only virtual program for a master's in that, and was able to jump in because there were very few programs around the world. That's part of why I created the program at A&M to be a virtual certificate, so we can have students from everywhere to be able to learn. But I'm sure we'll get to a question about that at some point. So, so I was able to jump right in. And what I did learn, I knew I was early, but I realized that for the applied side, it was even earlier than I realized, because everything that was so obvious to me about how this applies to business, behavioral science, how you can apply it to, of course, pricing strategy, but brand strategy, marketing, communication, internal communication, just nobody was talking about anywhere at that time. And so I got a nudge from someone to start a podcast and didn't realize, it was the first of its kind in the whole world. And so got lots of traction, and 4.5 years later, here we are.
Great. Because I mean, I studied economics too. I mean, and to be honest, I remember very few things from our textbooks about microeconomics or macroeconomics or econometrics and money and all this stuff. But I don't really remember anything about behavioral science, and it wasn't like 100 years ago. I mean, it was end of 80s and beginning of 90s. So why do you think it took so long to realize that this Homo economicus is a doesn't really? I mean, first, a human is a human. I mean,
Yeah, I think it is just based on the way that the brain is structured anyway, right? So because we are built to think that we're better, faster, stronger, smarter than everyone else, including the us of 5 minutes ago, we like to think that we conscious brain, we're in charge of and logically making decisions about everything that we do, and other people should do that too. And so because of that, when you sit down and you're building out a model, right? So think about, like you say, traditional economic models and coming up with, supply and demand charts and all these things, right? Like, if I was going to be buying something, what would matter to me? And you're asking questions of a part of your brain that doesn't speak the same language, can't answer in the same way. And so your conscious brain is making assumptions of what it thinks is going on. There's a really great analogy from a psychologist at NYU that he talks about thinking about your brain like a person riding an elephant. And so if you think about the conscious brain, what we like to think is in charge, that is the rider. It has a plan, it can see out in the distance, knows where we're going, and knows the best way to get there. But it's really at the mercy of the elephant, because if it wants to sit down or run in another direction, you're kind of stuck. You can't push or pull or logic it into going where you want it to go. You have to understand what will motivate the elephant and help nudge it along the way. You want to be that elephant whisperer. And it's that same thing, that 6-ton behemoth is what we're needing to be properly communicating with and motivating. But we like to think that our writer is talking to other writers and we're creating things for them, and we don't realize that the way that we act and buy is, it's the elephant doing the most of that stuff.
So we have this book club also. We read about Professor Steve Peters' the chimp paradox, and which is a similar analogy with the chimp, how you manage your chimp. And well, I think it's elephant is a better example, because it's really you cannot control the chimp either, but
yes, but the sheer volume of an elephant, I think, helps to convey that processing. One interesting thing I had there was a book club that I was brought in to be able to speak to a book club that was reading my first book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And they were talking about how it felt confusing that there was the analogy of that elephant and the rider, and then the fast part of the brain is the elephant.
Right.
And so it was like, am I missing something? Elephants are slow. And so, oh no, okay, we're mixing our metaphors a little bit here. Those are two separate thoughts.
Right.
And go with volume, right? We
Right.
have to be fast because of that, and we need to separate those two things out. But something that it's always interesting to have people read books or articles or listen to a podcast and say, you get to hear the things that resonated with people, that felt kind of offhanded, or the thing that I thought was so poignant that nobody ever asks about or whatever else. It's an interesting experience.
Right. But on the other hand, when we think about this traditional economists and their very logical theories and everything, this part of the world, I mean, like the Eastern world, was quite successful in, let's say, in trade, right? So recently I saw a TikTok video, and where there was a Turkish rug dealer. I mean, not drug dealer, rug dealer.
I heard you. I got
it. So he goes like he's with a lady, a foreigner and American probably, and so he was trying to sell her a carpet, and she was saying like, "Look, I didn't have in mind to buy a carpet," and he says like, imagine, I want you to imagine this carpet in your nice home, beautiful home, and laying down there, whatever. And then he goes like, you give me your quotation. I mean, like, okay, I'm going to see if it's whatever. So he's using all this probably anchoring there. I mean, like maybe he mentioned previously about a price, and then the perceived ownership, right? This endowment effect, sort of like you feel like you possess it, whatever. And the reciprocity, maybe like he offered her maybe some teas or whatever, sweets and this locum and things like that. And the scarcity mindset, of course, the like she's there for a short period of time and she will go back to her country and she will not have access to this carpet and everything. So um, we have this, I mean, like sort of background in the Eastern world. The Chinese have this probably this selling techniques, whatever. But you cannot see this really translated into big corporations. I mean, you still see a lot of communication or product or services which are like against the basic behavioral patterns of people. Why do you think so? I mean, why big corporations don't learn about this?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it helps to show that there is a lot of value in, so you are pointing out one person who is very intuitively able to understand human behavior and has had an opportunity to practice many, many times to be able to see what works and what doesn't, to refine that technique, right? There are natural salespeople out there that are really good at these things that don't necessarily know, oh, because of reciprocity, I know that if I, right? It's not at that level, but they've figured out something that works. And so what's interesting, and one of my favorite things to do in my work is exactly what you're talking about. Watching the TikTok video, walking through the airport and taking pictures of ads, working with my clients and being able to say, like, what's something that's worked that you have no idea why? What is something that you were sure was going to be amazing that was a total flop? And let's look and see what's happening in there. I'm able to really quickly say, oh, you're using social proof wrong, or interesting, I think reciprocity was helping you here. Or let's try to frame it this way, right? There are things you're able to break down and see what's happening there. There are a lot of people in small business. So we don't want to get our survivorship bias problem here, right? So we see a couple people doing a really great job of that in small business, and there are a lot of people that don't and get that wrong. In the same way, we might not see it as clearly in a lot of corporate spaces, but I know that there are people within an organization that are very skilled in these ways, whether they realize it or not. And it might be in their internal communication, or it could be, when they're negotiating with a vendor, it could be working with their teams, and it might be in the way that they're positioning products. But we just don't get to see it as much because there's so much secrecy among a lot of corporations. So they're not telling you a lot of what they're doing, even if they are working with different behavioral scientists and things like that. So I think that it's also then, if you see it less, is potentially because when we have a design by committee and you have people sitting down and saying, well, I wouldn't buy because of that. Like that wouldn't motivate me. I don't do that. The same problem that happened with traditional economics as we're building, the system, being we don't like to think that those things will work for us. And so many research studies have shown that, when you go and ask people, would you be more motivated by this or by this? And they say, I hate this thing. If you do that, I will boycott you and I will never buy and I will hate it. And then you test it, and that's the thing that actually motivates them to buy. So people don't think it is, but it can be very different. So when you have that decision by committee and people are able to say, oh no, nobody would care about that, and they don't fully understand those behavioral science techniques, and it can be scary to test, potentially you don't see it as much in some of that corporate space.
And one more question about this. Do you think there is a role of culture affecting behaviors in a different way, in a significant way? Because you also work with different clients from different parts of the world, right? So do you think culture has an influence on this?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a big movement really to be looking for ways that behavioral science can get out of the weird countries and being able to see more, from what's happening in different cultures, people that don't speak English, people that have different, closed versus open society, all the things, right? All the things to be looking at. In general, a lot of the principles still hold in some way or another from what has been tested so far. So, and even in the countries where we're seeing a lot of the testing going, you've heard me say on the show and in the book and everything, like, research is never generalizable. I don't like to say never on things, but truly nothing is ever going to be perfectly generalizable across all fronts. Like if you read a study and someone used loss aversion in this way, you can do it exactly the same way and it's going to come out exactly the same on the other side because there's so many factors influencing it. You have to be considering the context is so important when you're designing whatever your study is. So in this way, humans are a herding species. That is a universal trait and tendency.
Right.
We are this way. That's how we've gotten to be where we are. Am I going to be presenting herding exactly the same as you or someone from Peru or from China or whatnot? Potentially not, right? But we know that herding is something that can be present, and social proof can be a valuable way to be looking at that. And so being able to test and look for ways that perhaps there are differences and similarities across cultures is really important, and a lot of research that's being done in that space right now. And being able to understand, if you're selling, I recently had someone from Mars, Wrigley, and Kind on the show, and we were talking about some work that we had done together and some previous research that she had been doing where they were looking at snacking. And in America, snacking is very different than what you get in France or in Japan and the way that people think about snacking. And that is an important contextual piece when you look at applying the behavioral science techniques. And loss aversion may still come into play, but you really need to be considering your framing, right? You need to be thinking about that social norm when it comes in. So the concepts can apply, but they need to be considered in context so that they're applied appropriately. And there's definitely still a lot of interesting research that's going to be done there. And I'm excited to see and, hopefully be a part of some of it.
Great. So one more question about your practice, actually. When clients are reaching out to you, do they come with a problem in their hand, or it's more like a checkup? And how do you get use of their data, or how do you make your own observations to act on?
Yeah. So, in general, it depends of whether they come with a problem, but it's more that people have some sort of a goal, right? And so being able to narrow down, you're trying to increase sales on something, you're trying to be more sustainable. In this case, you're trying to reduce something over here, right? Looking at incentives, whatever, getting more people to sign up for something, whatever that is. And you don't need to, and I wouldn't, even if somebody thinks they know what the problem is, the first thing that I always do with anyone is to ask a lot of questions when someone starts working with me to uncover what the real problem might be. Because even if we think we know, typically that we jump too quickly to solving the wrong problem, and it can cost a lot of time and money. And so that's the main reason that people hire me, is to help understand the problem and then to look at those behavioral levers that we might want to be bringing into play, as you go to be putting something together. When I'm working with clients, the bulk of what I do is this sort of consultative strategy and being able to give thoughtful feedback and analysis versus having to do a full research study. Have access to the largest academic human behavior lab in the world. We can run some really great studies if they are needed. And a lot of what businesses are looking for and needing to do doesn't require a study of that magnitude. We can do some interesting things with A/B testing and being able to look at trying something out with simple tools that they already have in place without having to create a full, big, massive research project. And that's just more economically a good choice for them and time-wise, because studies take time. So then we're able to work with the data they have, and I can do literature review and be able to give recommendations based on best practices from, my previous clients or what I've been seeing around the world. And, we try some stuff.
And test.
Yes, always.
So let's move on to your books. And when I think about it, like thinking fast and slow, it's the kind of the constitution of the behavioral economics, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite academic book and requires deep concentration. And it's a great book, what to say. But it's not for everyone. And on the other extreme, there is then Ariely's predictably irrational. So like little stories, whatever. And I believe your books are in a very good balance of theory and practice, and it actually comes with an exercise book, right? Both books. And I think it has to do the fact that you have a commercial background, so you manage brands and people. So you sort of like very well merge this behavioral psychology with practices. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely a big part of my goal. One of the things that I have learned over the years and am really embracing is I'm a teacher at heart. And I think the podcast shows that of taking the time to really explain, and they're like mini lectures, but hopefully it doesn't feel like a really boring lecture when you're listening to it, right? We wouldn't have the hundreds of thousands of downloads that we have, I think, if it was really boring. But I really, at the end of the day, I want more than anything for people to be able to understand and apply what we're talking about. I think this stuff is so valuable and important. I think it can impact businesses in such a positive way if people get it and are able to just start trying it, to feel comfortable with trying it, to be testing in a responsible way so they don't feel discouraged if something, like we said, you read a study, you tried to replicate it, it doesn't work, and you say, oh, I tried that once, behavioral economics isn't real. And no. That's like, you wouldn't try to bake a cake and it comes out soupy and you say, I tried baking once, it's not real, right? That's ridiculous. And we have a lot of trial and error that goes into that process, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way when we test things in business. And so helping people to have that comfortable space where they can be learning, where they can go try a little something and see that success and be able to come share about it and feel that comfort is so, so important to me, which is why I make so many freebie worksheets, which is why I make so much content that's just available for people to be able to learn. I would always rather have less people, buy my books and really use them than have so many people buy them and have them sit on a shelf. I really just want people to be able to use them, which is why they are built the way that they are.
Great. So I have one point from your previous book, what your customer wants and can't tell you. So you say that we are less creative working on a deadline there. And indeed, I agree that, when I'm taking a shower or taking a walk, I get plenty of ideas because I'm relaxed probably and I'm at the flow. But I'm afraid I'm also a last minute junkie. I feel more productive when I get to the last minute, And do you think I'm an outlier, or is there something else in this?
Oh, no. That's we're definitely wired for that too, right? So that is, and there's I actually talk about this a lot in book 2 as well. So there's a 4-part conglomerate. I wish it was 3 so I could say there's a trifecta of things, but like a quad of stuff just doesn't really fit the same way. So we have 4 biases and heuristics that really combine in a way that creates this problem. And there's a brain chemical piece in there too. So one being, we have optimism bias. So we like to think that we are going to be better into the future. It's going to be easier. Things are going to go well. We're faster than everyone else, what have you. This combines with planning fallacy. So when we think about a project, combining with that optimism bias, we think we're going to be faster than we have been before, and we really underestimate all the little stuff that always comes up and adds up. We like to say, well, yeah, I had a lot of emails the last time, but that's not going to happen this time. And I know this always takes me 5 hours, but I bet I could do it in 4, right? That is silly. So we don't plan for all the stuff that's going to come up. Kids needing snacks, having to answer an email, whatever. So then we have time discounting. So when we think about ourselves in the future, research shows that our brain lights up like we're thinking about a totally different person. So committing myself to start training to run a marathon or to go climb Mount Everest or to eat better and to be healthier is super, super easy, right? I can commit future Melina to do things all day long. When the alarm goes off in the morning or I'm looking at a dry chicken salad, kind of go, oh, I have to do that, right? Doesn't feel as good. So in the same thing, when we're planning into the future, it's easy to think that, I only got 2 things done today, but tomorrow, now I can do 12 things on my to-do list and it's going to be so easy and I'm going to be in a better mind state and blah, blah, blah. All the things of tomorrow when we have all this time. The last one being bike shedding. So because we get scared and we have an affinity for the status quo and change is something our brain doesn't like because it likes predictability. When we're looking into the future, we think, ooh, that big project. It's easier to just dream about all the things that I could do. But until I get this one little thing done, which feels really important, I can't possibly do that. I can't launch my new website until I review all 85,000 templates that exist or whatever, right? And I have to spend all this time. I can't be upping my game on Instagram and doing reels until I watch a bunch of other people's reels, which sure, but you're wasting a lot of time because it feels scary to put yourself out there.
Eat the frog first, right?
Right. So that combination of things really comes together to where when we have plenty of time, we are very risk averse, and we're able to say, oh, all the things that we might be able to do and I want to evaluate. And when there's not very much time left, we get very loss averse. Yes, we are more efficient because we have to be, but we're not making decisions that are looking at how we can refine a system or making something creative. 3 weeks in advance, maybe you're thinking, oh, I could come up with a brand new report and this meeting is very inefficient and I could do all these amazing things and get new stuff. And then when the meeting is in an hour and it's like, okay, now I have to create the report. I'm just churning that thing out and I'm going to do that next month. For next month's meeting, I'll have more time. So we were effective in getting the report for today, but we're not very creative and we don't really work better under a deadline. We just are forced to do things quickly.
I'm glad you opened this up because it's one of my favorite points in the book as well. So you also give a great tip on the how to commit to your boss on a report or a presentation. So to avoid optimism bias and planning fallacy. And we shouldn't assume, but we should ask, right? So can you mention about that one? That's a great tip.
Oh, for sure. So I believe this is from the chapter that's called 3 weeks. We'll do it in 2, right?
Right.
Which is, so when someone asks you, hey, like when, your boss is assigning you a project and says, when do you think you'll have this back for me? And you say, ooh, yeah, and you think they're asking and they want it yesterday, which,
Exactly.
In some cases they do, but so you have that moment and go, oh gosh, okay, what's the fastest? It's going to be a stretch, but okay, we could do it by Friday, right? So you have this internal dialogue and say, okay, I bet we could have it by Friday. And then they say, oh, wow, I figured this was going to be at least 3 weeks, but that's amazing. I've got a budget meeting Monday. I'm going to email Jerry right now and let him know we're going to have this report ready. And you go, oh man, right? Like you could have had all this time, but you assumed something that made you feel this stress. Again, this is some of that herding pressure of wanting to be appeasing others and whatnot. So instead of trying to come up with something in that way and guessing what they want, if someone asks you, when do you think you can have that for me? I typically will respond with something along the lines of, when would you ideally have it? What's the dream for you? And that is intentional of asking that ideal, right? When ideally would you have it? So then if they come back with something that is way too extreme, you're able to say, that's nice. And like more realistically, we're looking at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in that case, typically you say, when would you ideally have it? And they say, oh, well, I mean, and looking at this, is there any way we could get it in 3 weeks? And you say, heck yeah, right? Yes,
Yes.
I can do that, right? That's doable for us. And then maybe you deliver a little bit early, but you have this ability to help your teams. And so just this one, I have several of these micro shift moments in the book to get little wins along the way. And this is in what your employees need and can't tell you. And so you're able to take those moments that can then alleviate pressure on your team effortlessly and make it so that they're able to be not stretched so thin. They're not going to have that stress of time pressure that makes them less creative and less responsive to change, but instead makes it so those things are a little bit easier and just better for everyone. Yeah.
That's a great tip. I wish everyone knows about this really, and it's worth buying the book for this tip. So and one more thing is about like we are so much trapped in our minds. I mean, like my epiphany was to discover while we think our messages or email messages are understood nearly like 90%, almost all the time, the real number is 50. You say, and this is a research, right? And
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't crystal clear all the time, but I think I will have to spend more time and effort to sort things out. Any other tip that you may give about this?
For sure. Yeah. It is an amazing thing to realize that, just to reiterate what you're saying there, half of the time that you are sending emails, people don't fully understand what it is that you're saying. Amazing. Half of your emails are misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So if we were to take that and say, take a step back, the other stat that goes with that, and I forget the exact number, I think it might be 68% of work that people are doing on any given day is unimportant, essentially. Right. And a lot of it is cleaning up this sort of confusion. And that if you think about all those moments where, you sent a quick email because it felt easy in the moment, and then someone says, oh, well, did you mean this or that? And then they try to email back and you say, oh, no, I was saying more like this. And then there's a Slack message that comes in, or someone stops by and says, ooh, just 5 quick minutes, that then takes 15, all these things that build up from, if you would have been a little bit more thoughtful on that initial email that was sent. And things like, so for me, I work a lot, like you said, globally. So I have a lot of different time zones to be dealing with. Mm-hmm. And so if I was to just say, oh, are you available at 8 a.m. on Thursday? I was like, what are we talking about here? Like, what time zone are we dealing with? I have no idea. I don't know what you're asking me. Mm-hmm. And then there's back and forth that happens there. Having that, pitch back of like, oh, can you give me those numbers? Like, do you want them in a formal report? Would you like them by this? Mm-hmm. Like, can you have them by even like end of the week is not the same as saying by 5 p.m. on Friday, or I want them by the time I get here 8 a.m. Monday. Those are two different things, right? And so knowing what you're asking for, knowing why you're asking something, being more thoughtful can alleviate a lot of that fluff that you just don't need. And it can make it so, again, teams work better together and are easier. And so change is one thing we didn't really talk about that the book stresses a lot. When we think about change in the workplace, we like to think about big stuff. It's a merger. It's a rebrand. We've got a new CEO, big restructuring, whatever. Yes, those matter, but the brain deals in these micro moments and tiny decisions. The average person makes 35,000 decisions a day, and we want to be working in those little tiny things to be having them, pile up for you in what I'm calling, snowflakes in that snowball of change versus this like tundra of iciness that is difficult to deal with on the other side. And so focusing on these little changes you can make can have a huge difference when we're looking at any sort of change from small to very large.
Okay. And so you were mentioning about be thoughtful, and this is like your signature, right? And
yes.
My signature question of the podcast is about your formula for creating value. What is your formula for creating value? It sounds obvious, but
yeah, I mean, for me, I would say it is being more thoughtful and encouraging others to do so as well, which is both looking at your own brain and response to things. So we do need that subconscious processing to be doing the bulk of those 35,000 decisions. And there is some value in every so often saying, I wonder why I opened this email instead of another one. I wonder why I felt abrasive to this request versus something else. What was that about? Taking a moment to be a little bit more thoughtful about things and asking some good, curious questions is important both in your own behavior and then in thinking about how you can be presenting information to other people, in understanding problems differently. Asking lots of really good, valuable questions is a great way to add value.
Definitely. I mean, asking questions or how to ask questions is really what keeps me busy all night. so
Right. Yeah. We are all born being great questioners.
Yes.
And over time we have it, right. Yeah. Yep. It's very much, worked out of us,
Right.
With all the, stop asking questions. And
Right.
in school, it's all about answers.
Yeah.
And being a better questioner is really, really important. I highly recommend the book A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. It's one of my very favorite books. He was my guest on episode 200 of the Brainy Business Podcast, talking about the value of questioning.
Okay.
Just fantastic for everybody.
Yeah, I shouldn't have missed it. I'll check again and I'll take the book. So, Melina, thank you very much. It was great. So let's talk about a bit how they can reach you and any news about the book. And actually, I'm also curious about is the third book is in pipeline?
You're the first one to ask. So as far as finding more about me and connecting, and hopefully everyone's really excited about checking out one or both books, the podcast, consulting, whatever else, right? And corporate trainings. You can find more about me at thebrainybusiness.com, and you can find the books really wherever books are sold, or they're from the website and the Brainy Business Podcast as well. I do have set up for your audience, for everyone that is maybe wanting to, learn a little bit more. You're kind of on the fence. If you go to thebrainybusiness.com/DYF, you can get one or both books free, first chapter for free. You can take a read, see if it's a fit for you. And yeah, just love to give that out to everyone. So thebrainybusiness.com/DYF. You can find me on all the socials as the Brainy Biz. And as far as a third book, I do have a plan for a third book. And it's in process of being, pitched and hopefully accepted. But when I talked with the publisher about this book, there were a couple that I was saying in the series that I think could, should, would be next in the And Can't Tell You series. So what I am hopeful is that the pricing strategy book will be the third one.
Wow. Okay.
So we've got customers, employees, and then looking at that pricing strategy more in depth. That's a piece of the first book, but definitely not as robust as that topic can be.
Great. I'm glad I asked this question, and I'm glad you weren't mad at me, because the second book is not even released yet, and people are asking about the third one.
No, I love it. I'm always working on that. The two books came out 17 months apart, so it's time to be working on book 3.
I adore your productivity, really. I mean, it's a great source of inspiration for me. Definitely.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mete Yurtsever. I'm a design thinking and innovation facilitator, trainer, and consultant based in Istanbul. My aim is to inspire people who are working to create value in their jobs and lives through the experiences of my guests. My guests are entrepreneurs, professionals, and academicians who are experts in design thinking, behavioral psychology, innovation, or creativity, who believes and advocates that the value creation in companies will be possible only through people-oriented approach to their employees and customers. The show is originally in Turkish, but I enjoy very much having guests from all around the world. If you like this episode, you can include it among your favorites, share it on social media, or even leave stars and reviews if you're listening to it on Apple. Any of these will allow these broadcasts to reach more people, and of course will be a great motivation for me. I'll be happy to hear your comments, likes, and suggestions via LinkedIn, or you can send it an email to mete@innolabs.ist, mete@innolabs.ist. Thank you very much for listening and your support. Stay healthy and hope to meet you in another episode.